another episode of the Pink Table Talk. My name is Dana Johnson. I'm your host, and joining me today is my special guest, Miss Mullaney.
MaryAnne Mullaney.
Oh my gosh, I still refer to her as Miss Mullaney, but for today's purposes, MaryAnne is joining us today. It's a special time to be able to sit with her today as we have a special connection through our school community, St. Monica School in Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin, for those of you who may be joining us from across the country. She is one of the favorite teachers for many generations at St. Monica, and it's a pleasure to be able to have her have a seat at the table with me today to not only discuss what breast cancer does for others when it comes to like support systems or just families in general, but we just want to just talk about the importance of being able to, whether you self-check or going to your doctor or physician to get checked out for your mammograms. So I asked her to join me today so we could talk about that in general and anything else that she would love to share with me in regards to her personal story. So again, I thank you for taking a moment out of your time to sit with me.
I'm happy to be here, Dana.
Thank you. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that she is a lovely storyteller. So I'm excited to hear what she has to share with us today. So if we could begin with you just telling us a little bit about yourself and sharing your own personal story. That'd be great.
I'd be glad to. Well, I've been teaching for 4 decades, and mostly in kindergarten, and that's a joyful, wonderful place to work. And during that time, one of the things that is really important to me for teaching the children is to feel, to let them become aware of what a beautiful creation their own body is, and to feel that they have a role in keeping it strong and healthy by feeding its good food and getting enough sleep and getting proper exercise. And so we build that into our kindergarten day. Kindergarten is sort of famous for doing that better than once they get into the more sedentary desk years. We do a lot of that. We do a play hospital every year where the kids get to be doctors and nurses and learn about a little bit about how their bodies work. So they're never too young to start learning about wellness and taking control of your body and looking for changes. And so then you have to, if you're going to teach that, you have to live that. So I always made sure that I had started getting mammograms when I was 40 and go to my checkups with my primary health caregiver. And I've been blessed that I have not had a personal experience with breast cancer, although both of my parents did die of cancer. My father from prostate cancer and my mother of pancreatic cancer. So I'm aware of the devastation that cancer can do to one's body and the family around the person who's affected. So I'm working in education. You always have to be thinking, how can we help kids through experiences that are not so easy to talk about, but it is easy to talk to them about the gift of their beautiful, strong body and how to help keep it that way. So start planting those seeds when they're little.
It's wonderful to hear you acknowledge that it's never too early for them to learn. I myself, having an 11-year-old and being centered around other friends and family who have children as well, just kind of trying to understand when it's appropriate to be able to talk about certain things. So to hear you be able to say that it's never too early to start is a comforting feeling, because I believe as though it just kind of alleviates like some of the onset like conversations that you'll have down the road if they're more comfortable early on.
Right. If you've had planted those little seeds, it's just another little step. There shouldn't be just one lesson on how to the birds and the bees talk. That should be happening from the time they're babies, when just even things like using a word like breasts in front of kids, calling body parts what they really are, and helping them understand about that we have a game that we play in kindergarten during the health unit about what is the job of, and it'll say your eyes or your toes. What is it? Why do we have toes? What does it do? How do they help us?
Wow.
And to help them learn about that everything that God gave us has a reason for it. So they have a reason for being on this earth. That what is your job? You've got to discover what that is. It's, part of it, in order to fulfill their role, is to take care of themselves and to look out for others as well.
It's a wonderful thing that you share. I will say, in full disclosure, like I mentioned, that Miss Mullaney and I are at the same school, but I had the pleasure to be able to witness some of the things that she just shared, and sit as a substitute for 6 weeks in her classroom. And it was a pleasure to be able to see that side of the coin and to see the relationships that are built with students and primarily your students and their parents, and just watch that growth, even though it was only a 6-week time period, but just to watch that growth within them and their understanding and appreciation for someone just talking to them as if they were not little people, but a person. And them feeling comfortable, enough just to open up. And the things that they would say were just like, wow.
They could be very deep thinkers sometimes.
Yes.
Sometimes you're like, what are they thinking? Got to figure that out.
Exactly. And that not only comes just within like the verbal conversation, but just in like some of their written work too, where I've had the pleasure of reading like some of your social media posts, and then, like I said, just witnessing it, like in person, some of the things that they've, just shared over the years. And it does make for just a more comfortable, feeling within themselves. And I feel like by having that opportunity with you, once they get to that preteen age or that high school age, or when they're at a stage when it's time for them to go and see a physician, they're comfortable with having those conversations, and it's not a fear.
Yeah.
And not to be remiss that when you hear the words, it's time to go get your mammogram, that's not scary. Like, I'm totally not saying that.
Didn't you get that that feeling before where they're, oh, wait till you get a mammogram, it's so awful, it's so terrible. I was like terrified, but I was going to do it.
Right.
And then when it really happened, I was like, come on, this wasn't that.
Oh, for sure.
It was not that big of a deal. Why did people, I'm sure they probably did frighten some people off from doing it. It's not that hard.
It's not that hard. It's not that hard. I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't say that some people were just like, oh my God, like they're gonna crush you or whatever. Like, you get like all these horror stories that people will come away with. But then there's also the side of the coin where at least you're not going in completely blind. And
better to think it'll be
Yeah.
harder and have it be easier than to go in thinking, oh, this is going to be a piece of cake, and then be like, oh my gosh, that was so awful.
Exactly.
I still think that would be better, because you don't, all that worrying time. And that's the thing about when I had a couple of times when I had my mammogram that I had to go back and I had to have a biopsy, and I had to have that time in between of waiting is so awful. And of course it turned out to be nothing for me, and I can only imagine how much harder that is to have for the women who have to go through that and then find out the news that they do have cancer. First you're in this limbo of not knowing and having the worry that is just terrifying.
Oh, for sure.
And how your life will change on a dime. So it's always a great feeling when they're like, okay, you're good to go, see you next year. And that's one of it's worth it just for that.
Exactly.
And most of us are going to get good news. So you got to go in there with that attitude. And if you go every year, then you feel like, well, hopefully you can catch something before it would be a bigger problem to solve.
Exactly. I just want to touch on the fact that behind the scenes we talked about the fact that you do come from a big family. And there are some viewers who may be joining us as maybe newly diagnosed or survivors, or someone just trying to figure out how they can be like that support system. And I found through previous conversations that I've had on the podcast and have shared with you that depending upon where you are within your stage of life or your friendships or family life, that not all people have, are blessed that way.
Yes, true.
So,
and you can have a lot of siblings who don't get along.
Exactly.
I'm blessed with 5 wonderful siblings, and so when my parents were ill, we were able to have each of them, 20 years apart, in hospice at home, and they both died at home with us as the main caregivers, which was such a blessing. And,
yes.
And for them and for us, to have that intimacy and that secure knowledge that they were being well cared for, that was a real growth experience for all 6 of us.
Yes. It does make a complete difference as to not only how your support system, but how you feel personally as you're going through any type of health scare or situation as such, by being able to have that comfort of knowing that somebody's going to call and be like, so how are you feeling today? Or it's been another year, you said in October is when you go to get your mammogram. Did you schedule that appointment? Because I feel like sometimes, although we may hear on like the news, or we may hear through like my podcast or through just word of mouth that October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and people hear that repeatedly, but it's not something that they just readily schedule on their calendar to go and get checked. So what were some things that made you get to a point where you knew, like, Emily, okay, this is what I need to do?
Well, it's been great. My healthcare provider sends reminders, through email, and says, you're due for this. Do you want to make an appointment now? And you can say no, which is, sometimes you're like, I can't think about that right now.
Right.
But I usually do take advantage of that little reminder that'll show up in my inbox, and I, like I said, I like the way it feels. And then they even have gone to this, well, you can do 1 year or you can wait 2 years.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh, maybe I'll go 18 months just to, split the difference. I don't want to, I guess there's some small risk of radiation from the mammogram itself, but neither do I want to let something go that could be taken care of more easily if we catch it sooner.
Oh, for sure. As we transition a little bit, we talked about your personal story, and then some words of wisdom in regards to why it's important for women, and not only women, men as well, who need to be checked and who have succumbed to their battles as well with breast cancer in general. Are there any words that you would feel comfortable sharing as you kind of, watched a couple of times me post about the podcast and post about the work that I've done, where it would resonate with those who may be watching today as to why this is an important opportunity to be able to start having these conversations?
Well, I think there are a lot of people who, and I went through phases of that in my own life, that are kind of doctor phobic, kind of thinking, what I don't know, what can't hurt me. But in the back of your mind, you probably are still thinking, you're a little anxious about the fact that you're neglecting something that you should take care of. Like, I had more of a feeling like that about the dentist, because I had a bad dental experience as a child. And then once you finally decide, I don't want to have this in the background of worry, I want to take charge of my life and my health, and I'm going to just go do it, it feels so great. It's such a great feeling to get the validation that you're well and that you can do things to keep yourself well. And I just would encourage anybody to not hide under a basket and hope it goes away, because first of all, if it is something serious, it doesn't go away. It usually will get worse and make it harder on yourself. And if it's nothing, if you're well, you know that, and it's such a great feeling. You can hardly even can't buy happiness, can't buy good health, but that is just a great use of your time and your energy, instead of just trying to forget about it and stew about it privately. That's not the way to handle problems. Got to deal with them.
Exactly. Well, I want to thank you again for joining me today and having a seat at the virtual pink table and being able to share once again within the conversation.
That's great. It's so funny. It's the pink table. My mother's name was Pink.
No way.
Well, her name was Mary Agnes, but she was the first girl after 3 boys, and her older sister had been asking that she hoped God would send them a pink baby, and so when she got born, she said, it's a pink, and they just called her Pink her whole life. So that's why I have my pink mailbox, and
I love it.
pink, a little touch of pink. My mother's funeral, everybody wore pink.
I love that. Maybe at the conclusion of this episode, we can go out there for our candid promo and take a picture by the pink mailbox.
In the rain.
It's funny you share that. So I have captained a team for several years for breast cancer, and I affectionately call our team Team Goldie, and had an opportunity to be one of the in memoriam artists for the Wisconsin Breast Cancer Coalition, and my chair that they auctioned off was Green and Goldie. And it was in honor of, she was a huge Packer fan. So the essence of the chair was Packer related, but to get her name in there was the Green and Goldie concept. And the team, because that was her nickname, was Goldie, is Team Goldie. So a lot of people who didn't know me personally was just like, oh, so your mom's name was Goldie? And I'm like, no, her name is Judy. However, that's her nickname, and that's, what has stood the test of time. So anytime that we sign up for any breast cancer related activity, we use Team Goldie. So it's what people,
Yes.
have come to know ongoing. So thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
And thank all of you for joining us with the Pink Perspectives powered by the Pink Table Talk. I'm your host, Dana Johnson, and joining me once again was MaryAnne Mullaney. And I appreciate you all for tuning in. You can follow us on Facebook or on Instagram and now Twitter. And you'll find this episode uploaded on YouTube under Pink Perspectives powered by the Pink Table Talk, or our website, thepinktabletalk.org. Thank you again. Bye now. The Pink Table Talk will be offering our fabulously scented, custom labeled Pink Table Talk candle. Each one hand poured by Cheyenne Candles as a symbol of continuous support to the causes and awareness of breast cancer. The candle light, we'd like to say, represents an eternal flame that will burn in memory to the lives lost and in commemoration to those who continue the fight with cancer and our never-ending crusade to bring awareness. Proceeds from purchasing go to the building of the Pink Table Talk advocacy and outreach, as well as our ability to support other programs and agencies in kind. Thank you for joining us.